live in Auroville the first time I came. I didn't like Auroville very much. I found it cold, I found it dry, I found it unfriendly. I preferred the ashram. I felt more at home. I come from an Indian background and I felt more at home. But very quickly, Auroville became the place where you can do all the things you dream of doing. And I was in an Auroville which was very revolutionary. Because Rakal, are they going to be given a bit of a history of Auroville also?
Yeah.
Yeah?
But you can go on a little bit also. No, I mean, if you want.
Yeah. So Auroville has gone through various difficulties. And at the time when I came to Auroville, it was sort of exploding. Because if you look at it, the idea of Auroville does not have any place in the legal frame that exists for lands, for societies. In some ways, Auroville is a new society that wants to create new forms, but we are situated on the soil of India and we are governed by the laws that govern this, and lands have to be owned by somebody. So when the mother started Auroville, she vested the lands in a society of which she was the president. But when she left her body in 1973, the organization in which these lands were vested, which had been bought by the mother by monies that had come to mother for Auroville, they began to exercise ownership rights, which means the people who were living in Auroville had to conform to certain ideas that this body that was situated in Pondi. And so that developed into a kind of a conflict, and finally the government of India intervened and passed 2 acts of parliament which have created a sort of a autonomous body called the Auroville Foundation, in which the lands of Auroville are vested. So in modern Indian history, this is the only case of lands being taken without compensation from a private organization, in this case the Sri Aurobindo Society, which is nothing to do with the ashram. It's a separate organization based in Pondicherry, and the lands were taken from the Sri Aurobindo Society and they were vested in the Auroville Foundation, which is an autonomous body of the government of India, the central government of India. So when I came to Auroville, all this was being worked out, so it was quite dramatic. The experiences that I encountered were certainly not what you would expect to encounter in a journey within into a spiritual self-finding. So in some ways,
So you mean to say it was not peaceful? It's a joke between us. Yeah?
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
It's never been peaceful.
I think you should be aware of that Auroville churns you down to the core of your being, and that's good because this is a place for transformation. And if you wish to change who you are, you have to die to who you are to be born to a new state of consciousness. So if you're asking me what was my experience, it was a state of shock, but in a very positive way, because you choose to do this, but you stop thinking, you just are experiencing what comes your way. But it never disturbed the certitude that this was the journey I wanted to make. And I can say after 43 years that certitude of the choice I made when I was 16 has not been disturbed. I'm on the right track. I haven't gone very far, but the track is fine. And Auroville becomes the field in which that journey can be best expressed, because there is no comparable situation to Auroville in the world. You do not find a collectivity. Auroville is a collective realization. India has offered from time immemorial a methodized and organized and systemized system for self-finding, which comes under the generic term yoga. Yoga is practical psychology where you turn the beam of self-development upon yourself, upon all the different parts of your being. India has specialized yogas for each part of your being. Everywhere in the world people talk about Hatha yoga, but that is only the yoga that is addressed to the body and the breath. But there is a yoga which is addressed to your emotional center, which is bhakti yoga. There is a yoga that's addressed to life and action in the world, that's karma yoga. There is a yoga that's addressed to your intellectual center, which is called jnana yoga. Raja yoga takes your whole mental consciousness, and each of these systems have very detailed and organized processes which have been recorded in books of knowledge for centuries. When Sri Aurobindo calls his yoga integral yoga, he's combining all of these, and he's saying not just one part of your being to the exclusion of another, because there's a tendency to develop one side and not the other, to make the rest of your being quiescent. If, for instance, you're a bhakta, then you develop your emotional center, but you make your mind go quiet, and you put it as a servant to the part you're developing. In Sri Aurobindo's yoga, you must use all parts of your being. You must, which makes it almost impossible, by the way. So in some ways, this yoga begins where all the other yogas end. And Auroville is the place, as is the ashram, as is anyone who is turned to Sri Aurobindo and Mother, trying to be serviceable to this great evolutionary endeavor. But Auroville provides you with this, this experiment in a collective realization which has no exclusivity. Are invited to Auroville anyone from anywhere in the world, of whatever background, transcending caste, creed, any kind of religious attitude. Auroville begins where that ends. And everybody is invited, if you have the goodwill, to try this experiment. So Auroville is a kind of a laboratory. It's a process which we discover together. We do it, we learn in the doing. It seems that when George Stephenson invented the steam engine, all the scientists of the period said, this is not possible. It's not going to work. And then he made it work. He did a demonstration and the steam engine moved. And he turned to them and he said, solvitur ambulando. It has been solved by its moving. Your problem, your difficulty has been solved. So in Auroville, we have endless difficulties. We have endless impossibilities. But we've got to solve them in the doing. We've got to work it out together. So all of you who are joining Auroville, Rakal sent me a question. He says, can you address this? What is it you should know? Well, I would say the first thing I'm finishing about myself and now I'm talking about Auroville, that's okay. One of the things I think that absolutely should be in the front of your consciousness is that you are not here to change somebody else. You're not here to fix the world. You're here to work on yourself. This is an experiment in growth of consciousness, and the only field of consciousness that you are actually in possession of, because you seem to inhabit that, is your consciousness. And it's a perfect field because absolutely every problem that exists in the world, you have a correspondence in yourself. And so if you notice something wrong with the world, well, turn the eye upon yourself and work upon yourself. The measure in which we work upon ourselves as a collectivity will be the measure in which we create a conscious collectivity. To attempt to change the conditions that exist on earth without changing consciousness is an impossibility. As we can see with the evolutionary crisis that exists in the world, all attempts to change those conditions without changing the user of those conditions, and that is the human consciousness in its present state, don't work. They don't succeed. So Auroville, we are reversing the perspective and we are trying to do things from within outwards. But of course, we have to be at the cutting edge of all attempts at bringing change. So from the day Auroville started, that's 50 years ago, if you remember the movement of modern idea of ecology, if you look at the 50s and the early 60s, the wonder drug that had been found, I'm just giving an illustration, to solve all of humanity's problems was DDT. And everybody would take DDT baths all over the world. They were so happy with this wonderful solution. In fact, in the latter stages of the Second World War, soldiers, before they were landed, it was a way to prevent disease, and you don't get stomach bugs when you land in a strange new place when the water is messed up. Well, spray yourself with DDT and the problem is solved. And then a woman in the United States began to observe certain things, and she wrote something called Silent Spring, Rachel Carson. She was attacked and reviled by all the companies and the people that were actually spraying insecticides and pesticides massively as a big solution to the food problems of the world. The idea of treating the environment with a certain level of consciousness where you don't destroy it by spraying it with chemicals, etc., began to emerge more or less in the 70s. But the day Auroville started, Mother said, please do not commit the same errors. In Auroville, from day one, it was organic agriculture. The Aurovillians who came here did not have any training in this. We learned as we were going along. But from the very beginning, there were certain do's and don'ts that were clear. We do not repeat the same errors. Auroville is not hierarchical. There is no boss that tells you what to do. And if any of you reads what Mother has said, she gave very few prescriptions to Auroville. Very little do's and don'ts. When she finally says no drugs in Auroville, she's very sorry to say that. And she's forced to say it because people seem to think that you can come here and use such materials. And she doesn't want to make that rule also. In fact, she prefers to say, all seeking for unconsciousness is contrary to the spirit of Auroville. In Auroville, we're trying to be conscious, and that requires us to do certain things and not do certain things. And we should know that without her having to give a message about it. So from the very beginning, Auroville has not been given prescriptive guidance. If we have any kind of basic standard by which we can function in the world, it is the Charter of Auroville. In India, we have a term called mantra. From time immemorial, in the Veda and the Upanishad, the poetry that created these ancient texts, which are called Shruti, which means inspired texts, not ratiocinative texts, not texts that come from a thinking mind, but ideas that come from an intuitive space. You could say that our mantra, our guiding energy and force is there in the Auroville Charter. The Auroville Charter was announced, was read out in different languages. First, Mother said it in French, and then various people read it out in different languages at the foundation ceremony of Auroville on the 28th of February, 1968. The center of Auroville was chosen by Mother. She put her finger on a spot, and it turned out it was the banyan tree that is at Matri Mandir. So the exact geographical center of the circular town that is to come is the banyan tree at Matri Mandir. If you see photographs of this banyan tree in 1968, it's really a tiny little tree, and it's existing in a barren landscape. I remember in the early years, if you were standing near the banyan tree, which is more or less at the top of the plateau, that's also very interesting that the center of Auroville is the top of the plateau, you could see the sea straight down. There were no trees, there was nothing. In summer, there would be dust storms, like when there's a wind like this, dust would rise. And there were almost no motorcycles in Auroville those days. People moved around on cycles. There were no telephones. It was bullock cart pace, everything that was happening then. So Auroville has speeded up since then. Not necessarily in the best manner possible in some cases. That's an argument that can be made. But still, it has developed a great deal. But the charter, to go back to the charter, is where we derive all our guiding principles from. Later, in the 70s, in interaction with some Aurovillians who were living in aspiration, Mother evolved a further text which is called To Be a True Aurovillian. It's 6 points and they're fabulous. Again, if you read them, it's a complete yoga. If you read these 6 sentences, well, there's more than 6 sentences, but these 6 points, it's a perfect guidance. We don't need more guidance if you actually pay attention to all these words. So what we take Auroville, Aurovillians, and when we speak about Auroville, we use another text of Mother which is called The Dream. It's a text she wrote when she founded the school in the ashram, in the Sri Aurobindo ashram, and it's called A Dream, where she dreams of a place where human beings of goodwill from anywhere in the world could live together in peace and in progressive harmony, obeying only one single authority, that of supreme truth. And that dream is another text that we use as a guiding principle for Auroville. So all of you who are joining Auroville, I would say that's something you really need to know. And not just read it, dwell upon it, meditate upon it, think about it, because those are what guides the journey of Auroville, those 3 texts. Beyond that, there were questions that she was asked and she responded to some things. And there are compilations which I'm sure Rakal and the entry group will bring to your attention. But even so, the main guiding force is the charter. So I'm going to break down the charter for you. Rakal, I do that. I talk about the charter. At this,
The 3 texts are in this booklet
ah.
that are being distributed to each of the talks.
Okay, so you have them there, right? And they're beautiful. In To Be a True Aurovillian, the first text, before I go to the charter, I want to go to that.
This is at the end of the booklet.
To Be a True Aurovillian. Yeah. So if you go to the first point, she says, the first necessity is the inner discovery, to find out who one truly is. When I see all of you, I can see you come from many different parts of the world. But that's not who you are. Your birth doesn't define who you are. Your family background doesn't define who you are. The religion or the social context, or in India, the caste, your educational background doesn't define who you are. Those are things that circumstances have provided you. The first necessity is to step away from that and find out who you truly are. And then at the center, in your heart, there is a being which is free, which is vast, which is all-knowing, and that needs to become the center of our life and action in Auroville. We are not Aurovillians, even though you're going to very soon get the title of being Aurovillian. There is no Aurovillian living in Auroville yet. We are apprentices. We are all learning to be that. Auroville is based on this soul finding, and that, when it becomes the center of life and action, will create this new society that Auroville wants to be, right? So this thing gets formulated later, but if you go back to the charter, that's what is needed to make sense of the charter. To inhabit the ideas of the charter, we need to find ourselves first. Now, in the West, in some ways, the modern world and all of us with the intellectual development, we are based, you could argue, upon what is called the Cartesian idea. Descartes was a French philosopher who lived a few centuries ago, and he questioned everything. Everything he encountered, he questioned. And then he discovered that the only thing he could not question was that he was questioning. So he knew he was questioning. And when he doubted, he knew he was doubting. And because he knew he was doubting, he knew he existed. So he came up with this very interesting mantric formula, cogito ergo sum. I think, and therefore I am. The whole scientific revolution, the Western Occidental superiority which has taken place in the last few centuries has been based on this very powerful idea to think, to question and to think. And it has given us the modern world. The ancient Indian idea is no, actually, thinking is an instrument you have. You're not your thought. When you step beyond your thought, when you step above your thought, when you step behind your thought, then you can find out who you truly are. It's because you are that you think. It's not because you think that you are. So the Eastern idea has been the opposite, but it has not been the dominant energy and force that has organized the modern world. If we wish to live as a species on this earth, we've got to reverse the perspective. We have to start to be first, and then to act from that state of being. And that is squarely what Auroville's intention is, to find out who you truly are. Ancient India, there was one quest that dominated all other quests. In the Upanishad, it is said, Kasmin vignyate sarvam idam vignyatam. What is that? If I know that, I know everything there is to be known. There is something to know, which if you know everything else. And that was argued as the state of being. Everything else, including the mind and its thoughts and its movements, including the life and its energy, and including the body and its movements, it's all processes and becomings. But truly knowing is to be. And the answer to that, what is that knowing which everything can be known, is you are that already. Tat tvam asi. You are that. Or aham brahmasmi. I am that. Sarvam khalvidam brahmanasti. Everything here is that. So this key knowledge is what India has to offer, what the East has to offer, and that is, there is a center. And if you stop spinning in the movement of your instruments and you settle into that center, you share that center with everything that is in the universe. Every electron is a chariot of that. If you say that is Shiva, well, the electron is a chariot of Shiva, but you are that already. Modern science has confirmed that. Energy, matter is energy. And every electron, every quark, every whatever, all the different terms, I'm not getting one in my head. In science, we say all of that is one thing. And that thing inhabits your consciousness. So that is the key to being well in Auroville. Because if you know that your journey is towards that, then the circumstances of your outer life become means of growth. Even the blows that you get, even the thing that doesn't make sense to you, is a means for self-finding. So if you can keep that spirit, that inner approach to whatever takes place with you in Auroville, you won't suffer so much. Because Auroville is a churning process. It's not a place to settle in. It's a place to grow in consciousness. And if you think of a caterpillar trying to become a butterfly, this caterpillar which looks downwards and which just crawls upon plants and leaves and eats them, it can't imagine a life beyond caterpillarhood. It has to close itself into a chrysalis, and if you happen to cut a chrysalis, what you get is a rotting caterpillar. It's only when the butterfly is ready that it can emerge. So you could say that all of us in Auroville are rotting caterpillars, because we are all in the process of transformation. I mean, just as I'm using it as a metaphor and as an image, but often you will encounter difficulties. You will notice that Aurovillians are not ideal beings. But remember, transformation is to die to the past. Just like we have examples in nature of mutation. We are trying to mutate ourselves into a new type of being. The process is messy, right? I think that's enough of a warning on what you should know, and I'll go to the charter. This is really because Rakal said, tell them what they should know. So I'm insisting a little bit on this point that please, please, please be patient, be settled, be solidly in your center. Do not allow outer circumstances to disturb you. And then you will be well in Auroville. And it's the most marvelous place on earth for this journey. There is no other place like this on earth. But you can only survive it if you make yourself the center of self-development, not, like looking at everyone else. Let them deal with themselves. The charter has 4 points. I'm going to start with the bottom point, the 4th point, because in some ways it's an expanding idea. It starts from a center, from a core of truth. So the most inward point in the charter is point number 1. I will go to that last. I will start with point 4. Auroville will be a site of material and spiritual researches for a living embodiment of an actual human unity. When you look at this idea of human unity, it began to make its way to the front of human consciousness almost 100, maybe 150 years ago. There is a wonderful poem written by Walt Whitman, this American poet, which he calls Passage to India. People don't study it. Is anyone from the US over here? Nobody is from the United States. Nobody studies it in the United States. It's one of those hidden poems, but it's one of the most beautiful poems that he's ever written. And in that, he describes how from time immemorial, there has been an intention. There's been an evolutionary intention. And he takes the literal fact that the world was explored because the European powers were trying to find a passage to India. And so this passage to India has been the way in which the earth got circumnavigated. But he also uses the idea of the passage to India as a passage to self-finding, because this place, that is India, holds a knowledge also of the soul. So he more or less wrote the poem when the railway lines were being set across the continental United States. There were 2 sets of lines, one started from the east and one set started from the west. The cable, the telegraphic cable was being laid across the earth. The Suez Canal was being opened, and he sees all these as signs, as indications for bringing the earth together. And he talks about it always being the intention that the worlds were being brought into one world and the peoples were being brought closer together, because the aim is unity. The aim of that higher intention is unity. He is not speaking from a point of view of religion. He's speaking from a poetic sensibility. He was a very earthy poet. He talks about the physical building of the United States. Huh? Walt Whitman. And he says all this is there because you have to find the soul. And he ends the poem, "Oh, my brave soul, oh, farther, farther sail. Are not they all the seas of God?" So it's like, it makes your hair stand up, because he's talking about the same thing that Auroville's intention is, to find the soul. And then once that has happened, and when the people have been united, then we will be ready for the next step, is more or less what the poem seems to suggest. So this poem was written about 150 years ago, or more now. I think 1864, more or less, he writes it. I'm not exactly right with the date. Then you have Baron de Coubertin, who's talking about, why should we have wars? We have to find a way for human beings to not fight these wars. The wars are getting worse and worse. Why should the flower of human youth lose its life on the battlefield. So he comes up with this idea that the ancient Greek idea of Olympic Games, where all the Greek states would stop fighting and they would come together on the field of sports and they would compete with each other. So he reinvents the idea and he gives birth to the modern Olympic Games. The idea behind the Olympic Games was unity, human unity, an ending of war. Of course, his dream is still trying to realize itself. We haven't as a species got rid of war as a methodology of growth and development, but still that dream was present, the dream of human unity. When the American Constitution was written, you had Thomas Jefferson talk about, he writes, the preamble to the American Constitution says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." The man who wrote this was a dreamer, a visionary, and they dreamed up this wonderful new society that was going to melt everybody. But of course, he's not referring to everybody. He had slaves. So obviously, they're not equal. He's not referring to women. He's even not referring to men who don't have property. His equality just is white property holder. And that's his idea of equality. So you have this dichotomy of equality, unity, but in life it doesn't manifest. Similarly, you have these ideas that come about with the French Revolution, where for the first time in human social and political life, you have a bunch of revolutionaries who shout liberty, fraternity, equality. And they storm the Bastille and they give birth to the new French dream, but then they add a fourth term, or death. So it seems that when we have these high dreams, we need to bring the opposite into play. We need to impose some sort of a penalty. If you're not following what I'm proposing, well, there is a penalty for you. And in the case of the revolutionaries of France, they all lost their head at the guillotine. There have been movements in the world. When you look at capitalism, the American idea is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I don't think you can pursue happiness. Happiness is a result, it's not a pursuit. That's clear in Auroville. A sense of well-being comes from the way you live your life, not as an aim. The aim is to be honest, to be sincere, to be true, and then you'll tend to be happy, rather than if you aim for happiness, well, you'll make other people unhappy, even if you find it yourself. But this idea of liberty, the moment you aim for liberty, you immediately give rise to inequality. The Bolshevik Revolution, the Maoist Revolution, the whole movement of socialism has been rather aimed at equality, and necessarily you take away liberty. It doesn't work. The pursuit of liberty and the pursuit of equality creates the contrary. The only thing that has been tried in human social experimentation is the third term, fraternity. And Auroville is based on fraternity, a fraternity of collaboration, but you cannot impose fraternity. You cannot say you have to be brother to me or sister to me. You've got to feel the sense of brotherhood. You have to share in everyone's pain. You have to not allow someone else to suffer, and only then can you create an actual human unity. So this idea of an actual human unity is to give birth to a fraternity of collaboration. It has not existed without exclusivity in the world up to now. So we're looking at rocket science in some ways. We have never had actual human unity. We've talked about it. We speak about it endlessly in international fora. We have created quite a few structures that are attempting to arrive at it, but we tend to have the other, the one that doesn't fit in, the one that's excluded. Auroville is not based on any kind of exclusivity. Are invited all to Auroville who thirst for progress. But the aim is progress. You can't come to settle in Auroville. So that's the other thing you should know. This human unity that we are searching for and trying to manifest is a very active condition of consciousness, and it's disturbing, and it troubles you at your base, it takes the ground out from under you. Because how do you keep this sense of fraternity with everybody? Every word in the charter has some meaning. So material and spiritual researches. In Auroville, it's a place for research, for experimentation. We look at any kind of experiment that has been tried on Earth and see, okay, where did it work? Where did it not succeed? Why did it not succeed? What was the point where it went off? And we study it. That's researches. And then spiritual researches. Are there processes that have been evolved in any corner of the world that are esoteric, that are hidden, that help us to go towards this goal? All this has to be studied in Auroville. So you don't throw the mind away. You use it to help you on this journey of self-discovery and human unity. That's a little bit the content of the fourth point of the charter. It's just my interpretation, but you dwell on it and you meditate on it, and you can come up with your interpretations of what these words mean, right? Point 3, Auroville wants to be the bridge between the past and the future, taking advantage of all discoveries from without and from within. Auroville will boldly spring towards future realizations. If, as I say, it's a mantra, then every word counts. This idea of a bridge. A bridge is needed when two things are separate. Here, we're looking at human past and human future. Generally, all educational processes, all learning processes, all social processes are based on the past. Who thinks of the future? Do we have a sense of the future? Do we have a dream of the future? John Lennon, when he's, it's poets who dreamed of the future. When he's talking about a future, he asks you to imagine it. Imagine there are no countries, nothing to kill or die for. Imagine there's no religion. Imagine there's only sky above us and heaven. So you find this kind of dream in the realms of poetry, dreams of the future, but you do not find it in intellectual thought. The human mind is almost incapable of dreaming a beautiful future, because people will say, oh, you're a dreamer. And you, kind of dreamers are dismissed in the modern world. You're not practical, be practical. Because for the last 100 years or so, the philosophy that's dominated human development is the philosophy of utilitarianism. If it's useful, if it's grounded on benefiting me, well, then it's good. And utilitarianism has hidden a lot of crimes behind it, because that's how colonialism happened. You could exploit the colonies because it was useful for you to develop. There was a philosophical basis to some of these actions that have taken place on Earth. Even Hitler had a philosophy of a master race, and that's how he... So we have to be careful of these exclusive philosophies. We have to look at a future that is not bound by exclusive philosophies, certainly. So a bridge between the past and the future. But Auroville has to take advantage of all discoveries, and the discoveries are again outer discoveries and inner discoveries, and Auroville has to boldly spring towards future realizations. Well, wow, there is no society that's busy boldly springing towards the future. How are we going to make an Auroville that leaps into the future? It's going to be constituted of a great deal of dreaming and visioning that the Aurovillians have to do, and practically trying to bring those dreams and visions down. So if you're a dreamer, Auroville is a good place for you, but you have to also try to bring those dreams and anchor them into this present matter that we are constituted of. And that is a good place to be in. So hold fast. There is this Langston, this black poet who wrote this poem before the civil rights really took off. And he says, hold fast to dreams, because if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. I have noticed some of my fellow Aurovillians sometimes in the nitty-gritty, day-to-day difficulties of Auroville lose their dreams. And then they really have broken wings. Do not lose your dream, even if it looks impossible. That's another thing I think you should know. Come to Auroville filled with a vast dream and hang on to it at all cost, regardless of circumstances. And then you will have the energy to leap into the future, which is what the aim of Auroville's charter is. Do not come to Auroville for practical reasons. Do not come to have a comfortable and easy life. You're wasting your time in some ways in Auroville. You may get benefit from Auroville, but it's a waste of time because life remains fickle and inexpressive. That's another sentence from To Be a True Aurovillian. Point 2 of Auroville's charter. Auroville will be a place of unending education, constant progress, and a youth that never ages. In the 60s, when UNESCO was beginning to look at human societies around the world, they came up with a document that societies, to be healthy and to be doing well in whatever their conditions are, they have to continue to learn to be. You have to continue to learn. The day you stop learning, you are moving towards death. There is no limit to the growth of consciousness. So whatever your age, there is no retirement in Auroville. People should not come to Auroville to retire. It's to come to an effort of progress. And yesterday, one of our senior Aurovillians passed away. She was 97, Nargis, and as long as her body was functioning, she was busy. She was doing things. She was young at heart. She was full of energy. It's just the body gave up, and so she's left. But our elders have been very good examples for us. Some of our senior Aurovillians have continued to work in their 90s. And if you see sometimes some Aurovillians running around on motorcycles, a lot of them are above 80 and more, and they're still going around. They're doing things. And that's inspiring. There's no retirement in Auroville. And then you keep the eternal youth. If you are always learning, if you're always growing, if you're always open like a child with a sense of wonder, with a sense of progress, with a sense of growth, then you're in the spirit of Auroville. There is no limit to self-education, and that's what. So everyone who's in Auroville is a student. When Mother was asked to speak about, she hasn't said much about Auroville education, but there is a very mysterious list. And in that list, the first school is called Last School. After school 1, 2, 3, super school, and then no school. And that's a list that she's given to Auroville. So all of you adults who are joining Auroville, you're not going to be going into any school system, but you are part of the no school that is Auroville. And you're a student of no school, but you're a student of life and you're a student of learning, and you will remain young as long as you keep learning, is what this point of the charter. Over the years, we've organized many school systems in Auroville. I'm teaching in one of them. But there's always a bit of maybe we've made it too organized. This argument remains in Auroville. Auroville is supposed to be the school. Every Aurovillian should be a teacher. Every unit in Auroville should be a school. Everyone, everywhere should be a teacher and a learner simultaneously, because there is no limit to self-finding and self-development. So that's the spirit of Auroville. It's an educational experiment. Everything is about learning. Do you want to ask questions before I come to the first? I'm just talking non-stop. Does anybody have a question, or should I just go to the first point and then we can pause?
Huh?
Which school are you going to?
That's good.
Well,
What you said, like now, the Auroville is just a school and everyone is a teacher. And people learn everything like on the living. When I saw that one, it hit me. I said love.
Yeah.
But I came here with my child. I was like 65 years old. It feels like people, they don't welcome child. Like children, they play and they make noise. But it doesn't like So, and also I feel like, I see many people come from the outside to have to follow it, like local people, and feel uncomfortable to see them.
Not the workers.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
In the final analysis, Auroville cannot be without an equivalent development on the plateau. So already, we are talking about a city of 50,000, we are already 30,000 on the plateau. Nobody is going anywhere. The Auroville that we are anticipating is perhaps 100 years in the future. It's not what is presently there. Everybody has to equally develop. But you can't impose that kind of growth of consciousness on people. And what you're saying about children, I think it's a reference to maybe some communities who are not welcoming families with kids. Yeah, that's one of Auroville's foolishnesses. What to say? People who come to Auroville don't stop being selfish and self-centered. And I have a feeling, one of the things that helped me to understand, now I'm talking about personally, what helped me to understand Auroville is when I studied the settlement of Australia, of the United States, and you had these settlers who arrived from elsewhere, and basically the indigenous population was destroyed largely. There is a certain amount of effort to solve the problem now, not enough in most places. In Auroville, that's not a given at all. The first people who were on the plateau are there. They will remain there. Now, the fact that they're working, it's bringing development. Auroville is not about creating an external equality. It's about growth of consciousness. You grow in your consciousness from the stage you're at. When Auroville started, the women in the villages had to walk 8 kilometers sometimes to just get a kuja of water. The girls were not allowed to be on cycles and motorcycles. Today you see everyone tearing around. It's a massive social change that has been brought about. But not because Auroville was bringing social change, but because Auroville was there, there has been a corresponding social change. To see the change further, we have to wait another 50 years, perhaps. One of the things that all of us who joined Auroville in the early years, we understood slowly is social engineering takes time. You cannot enforce change. You have to evolve together, and each one in their own way. We are looking at a traditional society which is very largely caste-bound, which is very largely suppressive of women, which is very largely controlled by sometimes social ideas which are limited. How does that change? Do the Aurovillians have a better consciousness? You've given an example that they don't. So what, in some ways, there's a dichotomy. There has been a wholehearted welcome to Auroville. And even now, the spiritual side of Auroville is welcomed in the local area wholeheartedly. There are sides of Auroville that are not so welcome. And that's good for Aurovillians to look at. But nobody's going anywhere. Everybody has to evolve together. And there is a growth of consciousness that's needed on both sides. And it cannot be engineered. It has to come naturally. It has to come through generations. When I started to teach, I've been teaching for 33 years. I had young girls from the local area, and I would say, why do you need to get married? Don't get married. Join Auroville, get into a unit, be free. Not a single one heard my voice. I was just talking in the air. Today, that might be possible, but it's 30 years in the future. It's not easy to bring social change. And there's a huge amount of work that certain Aurovillians are doing, and there is a huge amount of ignorance in Auroville about this inner purpose of development also. But it's the state of consciousness that we inhabit.
If I may just share an experience, I've traveled around India and interacted with people in rural settings, and it's definitely the condition and the thing of people here is way ahead of many other places because of Auroville existing. And just so that you know, in comparison to other parts in India.
Which is still not a good enough, we need to do better than we are doing. Yeah.
Do you speak Thai?
Not, my native language is Hindi. I come from the Punjab. I can understand a little bit of it, and I don't speak it. So if you ask me to give a talk in Tamil, I would not be able to do it. Should I go to the last point of the charter? So, Auroville belongs to nobody in particular. Auroville belongs to humanity as a whole. But to live in Auroville, one must be the willing servitor of the divine consciousness. Auroville has a center. It's the center of force and energy and cohesion. It's physically symbolized by the Matri Mandir. This is not a city like any other. It's a city with a soul center. The center has to be alive in your consciousness, otherwise it's meaningless. If it's just a golden ball, then it doesn't mean anything. It has to be alive in your consciousness. But it's to remind the Aurovillians that they're here to serve. They have to be servitors. They're not here for personal benefit, though you may get personal benefit if you serve. Actually, the Gita says that it's only when you serve and what you serve that decides. That which you offer to gives you a response. So if you serve the god of money, maybe you'll make a lot of money, but it may not bring you much well-being. Money and well-being don't necessarily go together, but it's service, it's self-offering. Willing service. It's very hard to be willing. So one of the illustrations you gave is the lack of willingness, the lack of openness. How we shut down, we close up, we get threatened and we say no to this or no to that. You will encounter lots of no's in Auroville. And how you deal with it will again depend on your sense of well-being or lack of it. To be willing servitors, very difficult, almost impossible. There's a whole yoga behind that you have to do to be able to remain willing at all times. And we are not living in a world where service is valued. To be a servitor is no longer valued. All the revolutions that have taken place in the 20th century have been proletarian revolutions that have uplifted the downtrodden. There is a kind of an intention in the world, in the time spirit, to bring everybody to a level of equality. So the idea of service has been a little bit lost. And Auroville needs to bring back that sense of service. It's when you serve, truly, that you get the best benefit. To know how to be a servant is actually a great gift. What do you serve is the next question. So, willing servitors of the divine consciousness. Again, what does divine consciousness mean? It's to be discovered, to be analyzed. You won't have people telling you this is the divine. If they do, then that's maybe their limitation. You've got to figure this one out yourself. And the first point, Auroville belongs to nobody in particular. It doesn't mean anything practically, but it does mean something about the sense of ownership. This territorial impulse where you put a fence and you occupy a piece of land. If you look at indigenous societies, whether in the Americas, in Africa, in Australia, they did not have the sense of ownership of land. And that's interesting. We've lost the idea as a species. Every piece of land on earth is owned. The world is going to fight over Antarctica very soon when the agreement expires. Everybody's established their little controls. We're not living in a world which is united, where everything is for the benefit of everybody. So this idea of ownership, you can't address it outwards. You've got to address it inwards. So I heard Rakal saying that this buying and selling, very vulgar consciousness, which is present in Auroville quite a lot, it's a limiting consciousness. It's not a consciousness you want to inhabit. It's better to be free of it. You're in a better state inwardly if you're free of it. But nobody can make you free of it. You have to make yourself free. The sense of ownership is an inner sense that we have to develop. So this idea that Auroville belongs to nobody in particular, we are trying to keep that. It's very hard to figure out how to do this practically. We have a housing group that manages the housing in Auroville, and at least we say no inheritance. The house does not automatically pass on to the children of someone who created an asset. If they happen to be in Auroville, if they happen to be part of Auroville, then Auroville will say, okay, it naturally goes to the person. But it's not a given, it's not obvious. Okay? And we are a small enough collectivity to try to work through this. It's sometimes a painful process. It's not always obvious. But the idea of ownership is squarely addressed as the first sentence of Auroville's charter. So that's again the dream we are aiming towards. As I said, we are not an ideal society. We are caterpillars trying to become butterflies, and often you see the caterpillar hood before you see the butterfly hood. Yeah? And you should be immensely patient with everybody around you, because you would expect them to be patient with your foibles. And that's also good, that you don't judge people hard because you don't want them to judge you hard. Right? Okay? Any questions? How are we doing time-wise?
Yeah, a bit late, but it's okay.
Okay, but I think it's time to stop, no?
Yeah, but still there is one or two questions. Thank you.
It was very nice.
Thank you. We stop?
It looks like.
Okay, I wish you all the best. And I hope your journey is full of delight. The Upanishad says the world comes from delight. So if you experience the delight of the journey, then you're in the truth. And you can't, delight is a fullness. If you feel empty, then you're not in the right consciousness. Just be in this consciousness of fullness. So the Upanishad has this, I'll end with an Upanishadic verse. Purnamadav, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. If you take fullness, this is full, this is full. If you take fullness out of fullness, you only have fullness that remains. So be full always. Be filled with the delight of being, and you won't suffer so much.